The heat came off the ground in waves, warping the air itself into something liquid and cruel, 118 degrees Fahrenheit, and the convoy had been sitting motionless for 6 minutes. 6 minutes too long. Sergeant Elena Vasquez wiped sweat from her eyes and squinted through the rear hatch of the M-ATV. The village ahead looked wrong. Not hostile, wrong. The difference mattered to soldiers who wanted to keep breathing. Khorasan Province, northeastern Afghanistan. A farming settlement that intelligence had listed as minimal threat. Civilian population depleted. The depleted part checked out. Mud brick structures crumbled into the yellow earth. Grain silos stood like hollow teeth against the pale sky. A single goat wandered between buildings, its bell the only sound for half a click in any direction. But where were the farmers? Where were the children who always came running for candy and bottled water? Where was anyone? Staff Sergeant Derek Cole's voice crackled through the radio from the lead vehicle. Overwatch. This is Amber 1. We're getting zero movement. Request guidance. Static. Then Brigadier General Marcus Stone's measured baritone cut through from the third vehicle, his armored command MRAP. Anvil 1. Proceed through the village. Standard patrol spacing. Eyes on the silos. Elena's stomach tightened. She wasn't supposed to have tactical instincts. She was a logistics specialist, a 92Y unit supply specialist, who had no business feeling what she felt right now. But her father's voice echoed in her skull, like it always did in moments like this. When a place goes quiet, Elena, it's because something made it quiet. The convoy lurched forward. 5 vehicles, led MRAP carrying Cole squad. 2 supply trucks loaded with medical equipment, and MREs bound for Firebase Sentinel. The general's command vehicle, and her M-ATV bringing up the rear with 3 other soldiers she barely knew because she'd only been attached to this unit for 9 days. 9 days of being invisible. 9 days of inventory manifests and ammunition counts and men who looked through her like she was furniture. The lead MRAP crossed into the village proper at 0847 local. At 0847 and 14 seconds, the world exploded. The first RPG streaked from the central grain silo and slammed into the lead vehicle's front quarter panel. The MRAP lurched sideways, its run-flat tires shredded, armor dented but holding. Cole's squad spilled out, taking cover behind the crippled vehicle. Then the rifles opened up. Not random fire. Not spray and pray insurgent tactics. This was coordinated. Overlapping fields of fire from at least 4 elevated positions. The rooftops, the silos, an alley between 2 structures to the north. Elena watched through the rear hatch as Sergeant First Class Tanner Reed, the convoy's only designated marksman, scrambled from the second truck. He had his M24 SWS up and was scanning for targets when a round caught him center mass. His plate, carrier absorbed it. He stumbled back but kept moving, kept searching. A second round found his throat. Reed went down hard, and he didn't move again. If that opening hooked you, trust me, this story only gets more intense. Subscribe now for more incredible true stories of courage like this one, and hit that notification bell. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. Private First Class Danny Harmon was screaming something into his radio. Elena couldn't hear the words over the gunfire. Specialist Ana Torres was trying to drag Reed's body toward cover, but the shooter in the silo had her pinned. 2 more men fell in the space of 3 heartbeats. Elena's door gunner, Corporal Marcus Webb, opened up with the M240B, hosing the general direction of the silo. But he was shooting blind, no confirmed targets, just suppression that burned through ammunition at 700 rounds per minute. Contact. Multiple shooters. We got men down. Cole's voice was raw on the radio. General, we need QRF. We need air support. Stone's response came cold and controlled. Nearest QRF is 43 minutes out. Air support unavailable. Assets committed to Operation Blackamer and Cunner. We hold position and return fire. Hold position. Elena almost laughed. They were fish in a barrel. The ambush was textbook. Disable the lead vehicle, pin the convoy, pick off targets of opportunity. Whoever planned this had done their homework. She watched another soldier fall, clutching his leg. The medic, Specialist Warren, was already working 2 casualties. He couldn't be everywhere. and Reed's M24 was lying in the dirt 15 meters away. Elena's hands were shaking, not from fear, from something else. Something she'd spent 3 years in the Army trying to bury. Her father had been a Marine Scout Sniper, 0317 MOS. Staff Sergeant Luis Vasquez had served 3 tours in Iraq and 2 in Afghanistan before an IED outside Marja took him when Elena was 19. He'd spent every summer of her childhood teaching her to shoot. Not just shoot to see, to read wind and distance and the tiny tells that separated a marksman from a sniper. Anyone can hit a target, he used to say. A sniper reads a battlefield. The target is just where your reading takes you. She qualified expert with the M4 in basic. She'd shot competitive long-range civilian matches before enlisting, placing 3rd in the Nevada State Championship at 17. Her recruiter had tried to steer her toward infantry, then toward MP when that didn't pan out. But the Army needed logistics specialists more than it needed another female soldier trying to prove something. So that's where she'd ended up, counting boxes, tracking serial numbers, becoming invisible. Now Tanner Reed was dead, and his rifle was lying in the dirt, and the shooter in the silo was working his way through the convoy like a man checking items off a list. Vasquez! Corporal Webb shouted without looking at her. Stay in the vehicle. She didn't answer. Her door was already open, and she was moving. The ground was baked hard as concrete, and the heat clawed at her exposed skin as she low-crawled toward Reed's body. Round snapped overhead, some close enough that she felt the pressure change against her ears. Someone was shooting at her specifically now. The movement had drawn attention. Good, her father's voice whispered. They're watching you instead of watching the objective. Torres saw her coming and reached out to grab her arm. What the hell are you doing? Get back to the vehicle. Cover me. Cover you for what? Vasquez. Elena reached Reed. His eyes were still open, seeing nothing. Blood had pooled beneath his neck in a near-perfect circle. She forced herself not to look at his face as she pried the M24 from his fingers. The weapon was still warm from his grip. The scope was a Leupold Mark IV, 3.5-10x40 mm. She'd trained on similar glass 100 times. The rifle itself was chambered in 7.62 by 51 mm NATO, 10-round internal magazine. Reed had fired twice before he went down. She could tell from the bolt position. 8 rounds remaining. 8 rounds. She didn't have time to think about what that meant. A bullet sparked off a stone 2 feet from her head, and she rolled behind Reed's body, using him as cover. It was disrespectful. It was necessary. Reed would have understood. From the command MRAP, Brigadier General Marcus Stone had finally abandoned the air-conditioned interior to assess the situation firsthand. What he saw through his binoculars made his jaw tighten. That logistics specialist, the one from the supply detachment, the one he'd barely noticed during the convoy brief, was lying in the dirt with Reed's sniper rifle. Sergeant Major, Stone said to the man beside him, "Is that soldier doing what I think she's doing?" Sergeant Major William Kane squinted through the haze. "That appears to be Sergeant Vasquez, sir. 92Y, supply specialist. What in the hell is she doing with that weapon?" Before Kane could answer, Vasquez shouldered the M24 and pressed her eye to the scope. Stone keyed his radio, voice sharp as broken glass. "Someone get that rifle away from her. That is not her weapon system. She has no qualification for her." The first shot cracked across the village, cutting through the ambient chaos with a sound that was somehow different from the others. Cleaner, more deliberate. Stone's binoculars swung toward the central grain silo. The shooter who had killed Reed, who had been systematically executing soldiers from his elevated position for the past 90 seconds, toppled backward out of his hide. He fell 3 stories and hit the ground in a heap of limbs and fabric. Stone's mouth opened, but no words came out. Elena worked the bolt without conscious thought. The silo shooter was down. One threat eliminated. But Elena's mind was already past him, already reading the battlefield the way her father had taught her. Asterisk, don't celebrate the hit. Celebrate when everyone goes home. Asterisk. She pivoted the M24 slightly to the left, scanning rooftops through the scope. The Leupold's glass was immaculate. Reed had maintained his equipment with religious dedication, and at 7x magnification, she could see individual bricks in the mud-clay structures. There, northwest rooftop, a shape that didn't belong. Human silhouette against the sky, trying to flatten itself behind a low parapet wall. The wall was maybe 18 inches high, enough to hide a prone shooter from ground level, not enough to hide him from someone who understood geometry. She calculated wind. 2 to 3 knots, left to right. Distance approximately 340 meters. Bullet drop at that range with standard M118LR ammunition was roughly 21 inches. Temperature was a factor. Hot air is thinner, less drag. But at this distance, it was negligible. All of this happened in less than 2 seconds. Her father used to make her recite calculations while he threw tennis balls at her head. A sniper's math has to be faster than thought, he'd say. By the time you're thinking, the target's moved. The crosshairs settled on the parapet wall, 6 inches above where the shooter's head would be if he was still pressed flat. She squeezed the trigger. The round punched through the mud brick parapet and found flesh on the other side. The shooter jerked once, convulsively, then went still. 2 down. Elena chambered the next round and kept scanning. The convoy was still taking fire, but the intensity had dropped. The remaining shooters were reacting to the new threat, her, and that meant they were thinking defensively instead of executing their ambush plan. Good. Defensive enemies made mistakes. Staff Sergeant Cole had managed to get his squad into better cover behind a disabled lead MRAP. He was shouting orders, coordinating return fire, doing everything a squad leader was supposed to do, but his people were shooting at muzzle flashes and shadows. They didn't have the optics to identify actual targets. She did. The third shooter revealed himself in the alley to the north. He was moving between positions, transitioning from one piece of cover to another, probably assuming the movement would keep him safe. It wouldn't. Elena tracked his path, predicted his destination, and put a round through his upper chest just as he emerged from behind a collapsed wall. The impact spun him sideways, and he dropped his Pecan machine gun as he fell. 3 down, 5 rounds remaining. General Stone was still watching through his binoculars, and the expression on his face had transformed. The initial anger, the instinctive fury at a soldier acting outside her lane, had cooled into something more calculating, more interested. "Sergeant Major," he said quietly, "are you seeing this?" "Yes, sir." 3 confirmed kills in approximately 40 seconds. From a logistics specialist. Kane's voice was carefully neutral. "Appears so, sir." Stone lowered his binoculars just long enough to look at Kane directly. "Find out who that soldier is. Everything. I want a full jacket on my desk before we reach Firebase Sentinel." "If we reach Firebase Sentinel, sir." Stone didn't respond to that. He raised the binoculars again. In the dirt, Elena was already searching for shooter number 4. The ambush had been well-planned, but well-planned ambushes depended on certain assumptions. Assumption 1, the convoy's designated marksman would be neutralized early. Assumption 2, the remaining soldiers would lack the capability to engage targets at range. Assumption 3, the elevated positions would provide total dominance over the kill zone. They'd planned for a convoy without a sniper. They hadn't planned for her. The 4th shooter was in the eastern silo, a different structure than the first, positioned to create crossing fields of fire. Smart setup. But he'd stopped shooting after she dropped the 3rd man. He was afraid now, hiding deep in his position, probably praying to whatever god he worshipped that she wouldn't find him. She found him. A barrel protruded from a gap in the silo's wooden slats, just a few inches of metal glinting in the harsh sunlight. Most soldiers would have missed it entirely. Elena's father had once made her identify concealed positions in photographs until she could spot a rifle barrel in dense vegetation from 50 meters. This was easier than vegetation. The gap in the slats was approximately 4 inches wide. The shooter's body would be positioned behind the barrel, offset to the left for a right-handed shooter. She couldn't see him, but she could see enough. Her round punched through the wooden slats at 1,200 feet per second. The shooter inside made a sound, high and sharp and brief, and then the barrel disappeared from the gap. 4 down. General Stone watched the 4th man fall and felt something shift inside his chest. It was an old feeling, One he'd experienced maybe 3 times in his 30-year career. The recognition of something rare. Something that didn't fit the normal distribution of talent. He commanded thousands of soldiers. He'd trained with Special Forces operators and worked alongside Delta assets and coordinated missions with SEAL teams. He knew what elite looked like. This logistics specialist was shooting like she'd been born with a rifle in her hands. "Cole," Stone said into his radio. "Status report." Cole's voice came back strained but controlled. "4 shooters down, sir. That's confirmed from our position. We're still taking sporadic fire. I count maybe 3 or 4 remaining hostiles. We got 4 friendly casualties. 1 Kia. Reed." Stone processed that. Reed was a loss. The man had been a solid marksman, not exceptional but reliable. And now his replacement had apparently manifested out of the logistics detachment, like some kind of tactical miracle. "I have eyes on remaining hostiles," Cole continued. "Rooftop to the west, ground level in the southern structures. They're pulling back, sir. I think they know they're outmatched. Don't let them disengage. I want this finished." "Roger that, sir, but we're still pinned. Anyone who moves draws fire." Stone considered the situation. His convoy was stalled in a kill zone, but the calculus had shifted. 4 of the ambush team were dead, and the rest were scared. Scared enemies made mistakes, but they could also get desperate. Desperate enemies did unpredictable things. He needed to end this quickly. "Sergeant Vasquez," he said into the radio, using a frequency he wasn't even sure she was monitoring. 10 seconds of silence. Then a woman's voice, calm and focused. "This is Vasquez." Stone blinked. She was on the command frequency. Of course she was. Every vehicle in the convoy was patched in. He just hadn't expected her to respond. "You have eyes on the remaining shooters?" "I have partial visual on 2 of them, sir. 3rd is likely in the southern cluster, but I can't confirm position without movement. Can you engage the 2 you see?" A pause. When she spoke again, her voice carried something that might have been frustration. "Sir, the western rooftop shooter is presenting approximately 6 inches of target. I can make the shot, but it's marginal. The other one is using civilian cover. He's positioned behind what looks like a family dwelling. I don't have a clean angle." Stone's jaw tightened. "Define marginal." 70% probability, sir. Maybe 75. If I miss, he'll relocate, and I'll lose a window. And the one using civilian cover? If I take that shot, I risk collateral damage. There may be civilians inside the structure. She was thinking, not just shooting, thinking, assessing risks, weighing probabilities, considering consequences. That wasn't logistics specialist behavior. That wasn't even typical infantry behavior. That was something else entirely. "Hold your fire on the civilian structure," Stone ordered. "Take the rooftop shot when you're ready." "Copy." Silence stretched across the village. The gunfire had died down to almost nothing, just occasional bursts from nervous shooters who weren't sure if they were still fighting or just surviving. The heat continued its assault, baking everything into a kind of stupor. Then Elena's rifle spoke again. Through his binoculars, Stone watched the western rooftop shooter jerk backward and collapse. The body didn't slide off the roof. It just crumpled in place, suddenly boneless. 5 down. Target neutralized, Vasquez reported. "I'm repositioning to get angle on the southern cluster." "Negative. Stay in position." "Cole, I want a fire team to flank south." "Flush them out." Cole's response was immediate. "Roger that." "Martinez, Kowalski on me." Stone watched 3 figures detach from behind the disabled MRAP and begin moving in a low crouch toward the southern structures. It was risky. They'd be exposed for at least 20 meters. But the alternative was letting the remaining shooters escape to fight another day. The gamble paid off. One of the southern shooters panicked when he saw the fire team moving. He broke from cover, sprinting toward a secondary position, and Elena's rifle cracked again. 6. The other southern shooter was smarter. He held position, waiting for the fire team to get close enough for his AK-47 to be effective. But Martinez had a grenade, and grenades didn't care about smart positioning. The fragmentation device sailed through an open window and detonated with flat, concussive thump. The shooter came stumbling out, bleeding from multiple fragment wounds, and Kowalski put him down with control pair to center mass. 7. One shooter remaining, and nobody knew where he was. The village went quiet again, but this time, the quiet felt different. This was the silence of a broken ambush, the silence of a plan that had failed catastrophically. 7 men dead in less than 3 minutes, and the convoy was still intact, mostly intact. Elena kept her eye pressed to the scope, scanning every shadow, every doorway, every imperfection in the landscape that might hide a human being. The 8th shooter was out there somewhere. She could feel him. They always have a backup plan. Her father's voice reminded her. Asterisk, the smart ones save themselves to the end. They wait for you to relax. Asterisk, she wasn't relaxing. Staff Sergeant Cole was organizing a squad, getting the wounded onto stretchers, establishing a perimeter. The general had emerged from his MRAP and was standing in the open now, displaying a kind of calculated bravery that soldiers either respected or resented depending on their mood. His dress uniform was pristine despite the dust and chaos. The man looked like he'd stepped out of a recruiting poster. Elena kept scanning. The 8th shooter revealed himself not through movement but through sunlight, a reflection, brief and almost subliminal, from a far side of the village. Metal catching light, the kind of reflection that a scope or a rifle barrel might produce. Her crosshairs swung to the source. He was 400 meters out, positioned in a drainage ditch that ran along the northern edge of the settlement. The ditch was maybe 3 feet deep, providing excellent concealment from direct observation. But he'd made a mistake. He'd poked his head up to survey the aftermath of his failed ambush, and his rifle had caught the sun. Now Elena could see him clearly. He was young, maybe 22 or 23, with a patchy beard and eyes that looked hollow even through the magnification. He was weighing his options. Run or fight. Live or die. She knew what he would choose before he chose it. He rose from the ditch, rifle coming up to his shoulder, aiming at the general who stood so prominently in the middle of the kill zone. It was a desperation shot. Long range, poor stability, low probability of success. But if it connected, it would be catastrophic. Elena squeezed the trigger. The round covered 400 meters in less than half a second. It struck the young man just below the left collarbone, destroying the subclavian artery and dropping him back into the ditch like a puppet with cut strings. 8 down. 8 confirmed kills in 117 seconds. The M24's bolt locked open on an empty magazine. She'd used every round. For a long moment, Elena just lay there in the dirt, cheek pressed against the stock of Reed's rifle, breathing the recycled air of her own exhalation. Her hands were steady. Her heartbeat was slow and controlled. She felt nothing, not triumph, not horror, not satisfaction. Just the hollow calm of a task completed. Then the weight of what she'd done began to settle over her like snow. 8 human beings. 8 lives ended by her finger on a trigger. They'd been enemies. They'd been trying to kill her and her fellow soldiers. But they'd also been sons and brothers and maybe fathers. They had names she would never know and stories she would never hear. Her father had talked about this. The aftermath. The way the brain caught up to the body's actions and demanded some kind of reckoning. You don't have to feel guilty. He'd told her once, when she was 16 and still thought war was something that happened to other people. Asterisk, but you should feel it. Whatever it is, let it pass through you. Don't try to hold it or push it away. Just let it pass. Asterisk. She let it pass. Then she got up and walked back toward the convoy. General Stone watched her approach with an expression she couldn't read. His face was a mask of military discipline, but his eyes were doing something complicated, calculating, assessing, re-evaluating. She'd seen that look on Commander before, usually directed at soldiers who had exceeded expectations or violated orders in spectacular ways. She'd done both. Sergeant Vasquez. Stone's voice carried across the clearing with parade ground clarity. You want to explain to me what just happened here? Elena stopped 5 meters from the general and came to attention. The M24 was still in her hands. Reed's blood had dried to a rusty brown on the stock, and she suddenly felt very aware how irregular this entire situation was. Sir, the convoy was under fire. Sergeant Reed was killed. I utilized his weapon system to engage hostile targets. You utilized his weapon system. Stone's tone was dangerously flat. Sergeant, are you sniper qualified? No, sir. Have you received any formal training in designated marksman operations? No, sir. Then how exactly did you manage to eliminate 8 hostile combatants in under 2 minutes with a weapon system you're not trained to use? Elena hesitated. The honest answer was complicated. The honest answer involved a dead father and a child who'd spent on rifle ranges, and a recruiter who'd told her the Army didn't need another female shooter. The honest answer would sound like an excuse. So she gave a different answer instead. Sir, I saw a threat and I responded to it. That's all. Stone stared at her for a long moment. Then he turned to Sergeant Major Kane. Get this convoy moving. I want to reach Firebase Sentinel before sundown. And I want Sergeant Vasquez's complete service record waiting for me when we arrive. Yes, sir. Stone looked back at Elena one final time. Report to my command post at 1800 hours. We're going to have a conversation about the chain of command, Sergeant, and then we're going to have a different conversation entirely. He walked away without waiting for a response. Firebase Sentinel sat on a ridge overlooking the Corazon Valley, a collection of reinforced bunkers and sandbag gun positions that had been home to American soldiers for the better part of a decade. The sunset painted the mountains in shades of purple and gold, but Elena wasn't looking at the view. She was standing outside the general's command post, waiting to learn whether her career was over. The door opened. Sergeant Major Kane appeared, his face unreadable. The general will see you now. Elena stepped inside. Stone's office was Spartan even by military standards. A desk, 2 chairs, maps on the walls, a laptop displaying something classified. The general himself sat behind the desk, hands folded, watching her with the same calculating expression he'd worn in the village. Close the door, Sergeant. She closed it. Sit. She sat. For 30 seconds, Stone didn't speak. He just studied her face like he was looking for something hidden beneath the surface. Elena kept her expression neutral and her posture rigid. Whatever was coming, she would take it like a soldier. Your father was Luis Vasquez, Stone said finally. Staff Sergeant, Marine Corps, Scout Sniper. Killed in action, 2013. Elena felt her throat tighten. Yes, sir. He was one of the best marksmen I ever saw. I met him once at a Joint Forces training exercise in 2008. Watched him put 5 rounds through the same hole at 800 meters. Stone paused. He talked about his daughter. Said she was going to be better than him someday. Elena didn't trust herself to respond. I did some research while we were in transit. Stone continued. Pulled your file. Made some calls. You qualified expert on every range weapon you touched in basic training. Top score in your company. Your drill sergeants recommended you for advanced marksmanship training, but you declined. Said you wanted to serve in a support role. Yes, sir. Why? The question hung in the air. Elena had rehearsed answers to this question 100 times. Answers for recruiters, answers for commanding officers, answers for herself. But looking at General Stone's weathered face, she found that none of them seemed adequate. My father died doing what he loved, she said quietly. I didn't want to love it too. Stone absorbed that. His expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes. Understanding, maybe, or recognition. So instead you buried yourself in logistics and hoped nobody would notice what you were capable of. Sir, I didn't. 8 kills in under 2 minutes, Sergeant. 400 meters on the last shot, with a weapon system you'd never fired before. Stone leaned forward. You didn't just happen to do that. You trained for it. You practiced. You kept your skills sharp even though you told yourself you didn't want them anymore. Elena's hands curled into fists in her lap. He was right, and they both knew it. She'd spent 2 years pretending to be something she wasn't. A paper pusher, a bean counter, a soldier who'd never see combat. But every leave, she'd gone to civilian ranges and put rounds downrange until her shoulder ached. Every night, she'd visualized shots and calculated wind drift and maintained a muscle memory her father had built into her bones. She'd been lying to herself. And today, the lie had shattered. Sir, she said, I acted outside my orders. I took a weapon that was assigned to me and engaged targets without authorization. Whatever disciplinary action you deem appropriate, I'll accept it. Stone's laugh was short and humorless. Disciplinary action. You saved the convoy, Sergeant. You prevented what was almost certainly going to be a massacre. If you hadn't picked up that rifle, I'd be writing letters to a dozen families instead of sitting here having this conversation. He pulled a file from his desk and slid it toward her. This is a transfer request. I'm reassigning you to the sniper element attached to 3rd Battalion. You'll report to Sergeant First Class Morrison tomorrow morning at 0600 for evaluation. Elena stared at the file like it might explode. Sir, you heard me. Sir, I haven't been to the training pipeline. There are soldiers who've spent years working towards sniper qualification. I can't just... You can, Stone interrupted, because I'm ordering you to... What happened today proved something, Sergeant. It proved that you have a gift. And in this army, we don't waste gifts. He paused. Your father wouldn't have wanted you to waste it either. The words hit her like a physical blow. She felt her composure crack, felt moisture burning at the corners of her eyes, and forced it all back down through sheer willpower. She would not cry in front of a general. She would not. One more thing, Stone said. I yelled at you today. In the village. Do you remember what I said? You said to get the rifle away from me, sir. Stone nodded slowly. I was wrong, and I don't say that often. He stood, extending his hand across the desk. Welcome to the fight, Sergeant Vasquez. The real fight. Elena rose and shook his hand. His grip was firm and dry, and his eyes held something that might have been respect. Or maybe it was something closer to recognition. One warrior acknowledging another. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me yet. Morrison is going to run you into the ground tomorrow, and every day after that for the next 6 months. Stone released her hand and sat back down. Dismissed. Elena walked out of the command post and into the Afghan twilight. The air was cooling now, the brutal heat of the day finally releasing its grip on the landscape. Stars were beginning to appear over the mountains, the same stars her father had looked at from the same country years ago. She didn't know what the future held. She didn't know if she could survive the training or earn the respect of soldiers who dedicated their careers to the sniper craft. She didn't know if she even wanted to embrace this part of herself that she'd spent so long running from. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. Today, when the convoy was dying and the bullets were flying and everyone else was scrambling for cover, she had picked up a rifle and done what she was born to do. The battlefield had given her the weapon, and she had answered. Sergeant First Class Aaron Morrison was not what Elena had expected. She'd anticipated a granite-faced operator type. All cold eyes and monosyllabic responses. Instead, she found a wiry man in his late 30s with laugh lines around his eyes and a habit of speaking incomplete paragraphs. He met her at the Sniper Elements Equipment Hut at 0545, 15 minutes before their scheduled meeting, and handed her a cup of coffee without being asked. You're Vasquez, he said. It wasn't a question. The logistics specialist who shot her way into a job transfer. Elena accepted the coffee. That's one way to describe it, Sergeant. It's the way everyone on this base is describing it. You become something of a legend overnight. Morrison leaned against a workbench covered with rifle components and cleaning supplies. 8 kills in 2 minutes. General Stone himself requesting your transfer. People are talking. I'm sure they are. Most of them are saying you got lucky, that the situation was chaotic, the enemy was already disrupted, and you just happened to be in the right place at the right time with the right weapon. Elena felt her jaw tighten. What do you think, Sergeant? Morrison smiled. It was a knowing expression, the smile of a man who had already made up his mind. I think luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. And I think you've been preparing for a long time, whether you wanted to admit it or not. He pushed off from the workbench and gestured for her to follow. Come on, let's see what you can do when you're not fighting for your life. The range was a quarter-mile from the fire base, positioned on a natural plateau that offered clear sight lines to a series of targets at varying distances. Morrison had set up steel plates at 100, 300, 500, and 800 meters, standard distances for sniper qualification. But it also added something extra. A series of partially concealed targets that required shooters to identify threats before engaging. Here's how this works, Morrison explained as he handed her an M24 identical to the one she'd used in the village. You have 60 seconds to identify and engage all targets. Some are hostile, some are neutral, some are friendlies. Shoot the wrong ones, you fail. Miss the right ones, you fail. Take too long, you fail. Elena weighed the rifle in her hands. It was heavier than her father's old Remington 700, but the balance was similar. The scope was pristine, recently zeroed. Someone had taken care of this weapon. Any questions? No, Sergeant. Then begin when ready. Elena shouldered the rifle and began scanning. The first target was obvious. A steel silhouette at 100 meters with a crude weapon painted on its surface. She put a round through it without conscious thought, already moving to the next. The second target was trickier. A partial figure behind a barrier at 300 meters, weapon partially visible. Hostile. She engaged and moved on. Third target. 500 meters, no weapon visible. Hands raised in a surrender posture. Neutral. She skipped it. Fourth target. Behind the surrender figure, barely visible, rifle barrel protruding. Hostile using human shield. She put a round to the gap between the two silhouettes, striking the armed figure without touching the surrendering one. Morrison made a sound that might have been surprise. Fifth through eighth targets blurred together. She identified, engaged, moved. Her breathing stayed controlled. Her heart rate stayed low. The rifle became an extension of her body, responding to thoughts rather than conscious commands. 53 seconds. All hostile targets neutralized. 0 friendly or neutral casualties. Morrison walked downrange to verify her shots while Elena ejected the magazine and cleared the weapon. When he returned, his expression had changed. The professional assessment was gone, replaced by something warmer. Your father taught you well, he said quietly. Elena looked away. You knew him? We trained together once. Long time ago. Different lifetime. Morrison paused. He talked about you. Said his daughter was going to revolutionize the sniper community someday. Said she had something special, something that couldn't be taught. He was biased. Maybe, but he was also right. Morrison took the rifle from her hands and set it on the table. I'm not going to sugarcoat this. Vasquez, the next 6 months are going to be the hardest of your life. You're coming into this late, without the formal training pipeline that everyone else went through. Some people are going to resent you. Some are going to test you. Some are going to hope you fail. I'm used to that, Sergeant. I don't doubt it. Morrison's eyes met hers. But here's what you need to understand. You've already proven you can shoot. What you need to prove now is that you can think, react, lead. A sniper isn't just a shooter. She's a tactician, an observer, a force multiplier who can change the entire shape of a battlefield with one well-placed round. He pulled a folder from his pack and handed it to her. Your first mission brief. We deploy in 72 hours. You'll be my spotter. Elena opened the folder and scanned the contents. Reconnaissance operation in the Corporal Valley. High-value target identification. Overwatch support for infantry patrol. 3-day duration. I've never worked as a spotter, she said. Then you'll learn. Morrison was already walking away. Consider this your final exam. Vasquez. Pass it, and you're officially part of the element. Fail it, and you go back to counting ammunition boxes. He paused at the edge of the range, looking back at her. Don't fail. The Corporal Valley was known among soldiers as the Valley of Death. It was a 6-mile stretch of rugged terrain that had swallowed entire squads without warning, a place where the enemy knew every rock, every trail, every kill zone, and used that knowledge with ruthless efficiency. Elena lay prone on a rocky outcropping 300 meters above the valley floor, her body pressed flat against stone that had been baking in the sun for hours. Her ghillie suit was soaked with sweat, but she didn't move, didn't adjust, didn't breathe heavier than necessary. Beside her, Morrison worked his spotting scope with practiced efficiency. Compound at bearing 235. 3 military-age males. 2 carrying AK variants. Third appears unarmed. Elena shifted her scope to the indicated bearing. The compound was a typical Afghan mud brick structure. 2 stories, courtyard in the center. The three men Morrison had identified were standing near the main entrance, engaged in conversation. I see them, two armed, one civilian dress. Probable local elder, not our target. Morrison continued scanning. Movement in the second floor window. Can you confirm? She adjusted her scope slightly. The window was dark, difficult to see into from this angle, but there was definitely motion inside. Confirmed. One individual, maybe two. Can't identify weapons. Hold position. Let's see what develops. They'd been on the mountainside for 18 hours. No sleep, minimal food, just watching and waiting and documenting everything that moved to the valley below. This was the part of sniper work that movies never showed. The interminable patience, the crushing boredom, the discipline required to remain motionless for hours on end while your body screamed for relief. Elena had thought she was prepared for it. She wasn't, but she endured anyway. Vehicle approaching from the south, Morrison murmured. Toyota Hilux, white. Looks like a technical. Bed-mounted weapon, probably PKM. Elena swung her scope. The technical was raising dust on a narrow road that wound through the valley, moving fast. Too fast for a casual visitor. They're in a hurry. They are. Morrison's voice had sharpened. This might be our boy. Their target was a mid-level Taliban commander named Farah Hassan, responsible for coordinating IED attacks that had killed 17 coalition soldiers over the past year. Intelligence had placed him somewhere in the Korengal, meeting with local elders to arrange safe passage and resupply. Their mission was to confirm his location and, if the opportunity presented itself, eliminate him. The technical skidded to a stop outside the compound. Two men emerged from the cab, both armed, both moving with the alert efficiency of trained fighters. They scanned the surrounding terrain, looking for exactly the kind of threat that Elena and Morrison represented. But Elena and Morrison were very good at not being seen. A third man emerged from the technical's bed. He was older than the others. With a gray-streaked beard and a pronounced limp, he wore traditional Afghan clothing, but his bearing was unmistakably military. That's Hassan, Morrison breathed. Facial match confirmed. Target is positively identified. Elena felt her pulse quicken. Her scope was already centered on Hassan's chest, the crosshairs floating over his heart. At 300 meters with no wind, it was an easy shot, almost impossible to miss. Do I have authorization to engage? Morrison was already on the radio, transmitting their findings to battalion headquarters. The response came back in seconds, crackling through his earpiece. Negative, Morrison said, frustration bleeding into his voice. Command wants us to continue observation. They think Hassan might lead us to a larger network. Elena's finger tightened on the trigger guard, not the trigger itself. She had too much discipline for that. But the frustration was overwhelming. The man responsible for 17 American deaths was standing 300 meters away, completely vulnerable, and they were going to let him walk. Understood, she said. Her voice was steady, even if her heart wasn't. Hassan entered the compound. The two guards took up positions outside, settling in for what looked like a long wait. Whatever meeting was about to take place, it was important enough to warrant serious security. You want to take that shot, Morrison observed. Yes, Sergeant. You would have been right to want it. Those 17 soldiers deserved justice. Morrison paused. But you also would have been wrong. Because our job isn't just to kill, it's to understand, to see the bigger picture, to make the shot that matters, not just the shot that satisfies. Elena processed that. It ran counter to everything her instincts screamed for, but she could see the logic. One dead commander was a tactical victory. Understanding an entire network was a strategic one. How do you do it? She asked. How do you watch someone like that and not pull the trigger? Morrison was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was older than his face. You remember that every bullet you fire has consequences. Some of them intended, some of them not. And you decide that you're going to be certain, absolutely certain, before you add to your count. He looked at her through the fading light. Your count is 8, Vasquez. 8 lives ended by your hand. That number is going to grow, probably by a lot, if you stay in this job long enough. The question you need to answer for yourself is this. Are you going to let that number define you, or are you going to make sure every digit is justified? Elena didn't answer. She kept her eye to the scope and watched Hassan's compound until darkness made observation impossible. The mission lasted 2 more days. They documented every visitor to Hassan's compound, photographed faces, recorded conversations through directional microphones, mapped every approach and exit route. The intelligence they gathered would eventually lead to a coordinated strike that killed Hassan and 11 of his lieutenants, though Elena wouldn't learn about that for months. What she learned in those 2 days was something more valuable than enemy intelligence. She learned patience. She learned the particular discipline of waiting, of trusting the process, of understanding that sometimes the most important shot was the one you didn't take. She learned how to read terrain like a language and how to predict human behavior based on the smallest details. She learned that being a sniper wasn't about killing. It was about watching, understanding, and choosing. By the time they extracted, she was no longer the same soldier who had picked up Tanner Reed's rifle in a half-abandoned village. She was something else entirely. 3 months later, Elena was officially designated a scout sniper. The ceremony was small. Just Morrison, General Stone, and a handful of soldiers who had watched the progression with varying degrees of skepticism and respect. Stone pinned the crossed rifles to her collar himself, and his eyes held the same calculating respect they'd shown in the village. "You've earned this," he told her. "Every day for the next 30 years, I want you to remember that you earned it." 6 months after that, she led her first independent mission. A 2-person sniper team tasked with providing overwatch for a humanitarian convoy moving through contested territory. The mission was successful. 0 casualties. 0 shots fired. Sometimes the best missions were the quiet ones, but not always. The ambush came on her 7th independent deployment, a routine patrol overwatch that went sideways when Taliban fighters caught the infantry squad in a crossfire. Elena was positioned on a ridgeline 400 meters from the kill zone, alone, her spotter having been evacuated 2 days earlier with a case of severe dysentery. She watched through her scope as American soldiers scrambled for cover, pinned down by accurate enemy fire from multiple positions. The scene was sickeningly familiar. The same chaos, the same desperate voices on the radio, the same mathematics of life and death playing out in real time. But this time, she was ready. Her first shot dropped a PKM gunner who was anchoring the enemy's right flank. The second and third eliminated shooters in elevated positions. The 4th, 5th, and 6th targeted fighters who were attempting to maneuver toward the pinned squad. In 90 seconds, she turned a catastrophic ambush into a survivable engagement. The squad leader, a young lieutenant named Torres, later told her that he'd never seen anything like it. "It was like watching God reach down and start picking people off," he said, and there was something close to awe in his voice. Elena didn't feel like God. She felt like a woman doing the job she'd been trained for, the job her father prepared her for, whether either of them had intended it. But she understood, finally, what Morrison had meant about making every shot count. 1 year to the day after the village ambush, Elena stood on the tarmac at Bagram Airfield, waiting for a transport back to the States. Her deployment was ending. Her next assignment was stateside, instructor duty at the Army's sniper school, passing on what she learned to the next generation of marksmen. She wasn't sure how she felt about that. The sun was setting over the Hindu Kush, painting the mountains in colors that no camera could ever capture. She'd grown to love this landscape, despite everything it had cost her, or maybe because of it. It was hard to tell the difference anymore. "Vasquez." She turned. General Stone was walking toward her, out of uniform for once, wearing civilian clothes that looked uncomfortable on his military frame. He stopped a few feet away and studied her with those assessing eyes. "General, I didn't expect to see you here. I made a point of it." Stone clasped his hands behind his back. "I wanted to tell you something before you left. Something I should have said a long time ago." Elena waited. "That day in the village, when I yelled at you to put down the rifle, I wasn't just wrong about your capabilities. I was wrong about you entirely." Stone's voice was quieter than she'd ever heard it. "I looked at you and saw a logistics specialist who was out her depth. I didn't see the soldier you actually were." "Sir, let me finish." Stone held up a hand. "The Army is full of people like me. People who look at a uniform and see a job title. People who make assumptions based on MOS codes and assignment histories. You challenged every one of those assumptions, and you made all of us better for it. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small wooden box. This belonged to Tanner Reed. His family sent it to me after his death, with instructions to give it to whoever was worthy of carrying his legacy forward. Elena opened the box. Inside was a challenge coin, brass, worn smooth by years of handling. The inscription read, "One shot, one life. Make them count." Her throat tightened. "I don't." "You do." Stone's hand closed over hers, pressing the coin into her palm. "Reed would have been proud of what you become." "I know I am." He stepped back, snapping to attention, and rendered a salute that was somehow more personal than formal. Elena returned it, and for a long moment they stood there, two soldiers, one ending a chapter, the other beginning one. Then Stone nodded once and walked away. Elena watched him go. Then she looked down at the coin in her hand, feeling its weight, understanding its meaning. She'd spent years running from her father's legacy, running from the gift he'd given her, running from the person she was always meant to be. In a half-abandoned village, with bullets flying and soldiers dying, she'd finally stopped running. The battlefield had given her a rifle. She'd answered the call, and she would keep answering it for as long as she was able. Not because she loved war, but because she loved the soldiers who fought it. Because every shot she took was a life she might save. Because the weight of the rifle in her hands was not a burden, but a responsibility. One shot, one life, make them count. The transport's engines roared to life. Elena pocketed the coin, shouldered her bag, and walked toward the waiting aircraft. Tomorrow, she would begin training the next generation. Today, she was finally at peace. If Elena's story moved you, hit that like button now. Tell me in the comments, would you have picked up that rifle, even knowing the consequences? Subscribe if you haven't already. More stories like this are coming every week. Thanks for watching.